The sound of a young cadet's jeer bounced unnaturally through the marble corridors of the Hart Senate office building. "What is this? Bring your grandpa to work day," he sneered, lips curling with mockery. Two of his companions chuckled beside him, their stiff, freshly pressed uniforms looking strangely out of place against the grandeur of the historic hallway. Meanwhile, Wayne Jenkins, 78 years old, moved at his own steady rhythm. The broom in his hands brushed across the gleaming floor in measured strokes, the soft rasp of bristles echoing like a heartbeat in the cavernous space. He neither looked up nor acknowledged them. He didn't need to. He had faced voices like these before. Mocking, arrogant, filled with false bravado, in places far harsher, far more unforgiving than this quiet Senate building. Peterson, the lead cadet, strutted forward with the kind of swagger that came not from wisdom, but from ignorance. His jaw jutted further than his grasp of respect or humility. With deliberate insolence, he stepped squarely in front of the broom, blocking Wayne's path. "Hey, old man, I'm talking to you. You deaf or something?" Wayne halted his sweeping. His movements were unhurried, deliberate. He raised his eyes at last, gaze calm, hands still resting firmly on the broom handle. The boys, because that was all they were, saw only an elderly janitor stooped with age, a leftover from another era, barely worth noticing. They mistook his silence for weakness, his hunchback for irrelevance. They had no idea who truly stood before them. The small seed of arrogance sprouted quickly in the hollow, echoing hallway. Encouraged by Wayne's stillness and the snickers of his friends, Peterson pressed harder. "You're supposed to respect this uniform, Pops. We're officers in training. You should stand a little straighter when one of us addresses you." He puffed out his chest in exaggerated fashion, a hollow caricature of the authority he so desperately wanted to claim. Wayne's posture did not shift. Though age had curved his spine, it remained straighter and truer than any of theirs would likely ever be. He had stood straight when comrades fell beside him in the Iadrang Valley. He had borne the unspoken weight of a conflicted nation on his back without bending. He would not straighten for this boy. "I'm just doing my job, son," Wayne replied at last. His voice was low, gravelly and steady, deliberately calm. "Trying to keep this place clean." The simple, unembellished answer struck Peterson harder than any heated retort could have. To him, it was not humility, but dismissal, a refusal to play along with his little show of dominance. Peterson's face twisted. He lashed out with petty cruelty, swinging his boot through the small pile of dust Wayne had carefully swept together, scattering it across the spotless floor. "Your job," he scoffed, "your job is to stay invisible. Step aside when men like us walk through here." His friends barked laughter, sharp and ugly in the quiet expanse of the marble hall. A few staffers passing through caught sight of the scene. Their faces tightened, their pace quickened. They glanced at the trio of cadets hemming in the old janitor and felt the sting of injustice in their chests. Yet not one stopped. Intervention carried risk. A single complaint, a tangled confrontation. It was easier to look away, and so they did. Wayne remained where he was, silent, unflinching, holding his broom as though it were both shield and anchor. The second cadet, emboldened by Peterson's boldness, jabbed a finger toward Wayne's collar with a mocking grin. "Look at this guy," he sneered. "Probably never lifted a finger for his country. Just spent his whole life pushing a broom around." Wayne's eyes did not waver. He kept them fixed squarely on Peterson, ignoring the jab from the side completely. He had learned long ago a principle that kept men alive. Focus on the threat. Dismiss the noise. Distractions couldn't kill you. The real danger could. His palms tightened slightly on the handle. The wood was smooth, worn down over decades of use, familiar as an old companion. In his roughened hands, it felt solid, grounding, something tangible in a moment that was quickly spinning into absurdity. His voice came quiet but even, uncolored by anger. "Don't you boys have a class to get to?" The calmness only fanned their irritation. They wanted a reaction, shame, fear, anger. But Wayne gave them none of it. His composure was like water slipping through their fists, leaving them only with their own childish frustration reflected back at them. Peterson's face flushed red. He was unaccustomed to being handled this way. He expected automatic deference, the kind he thought his crisp uniform demanded. To him, the old janitor wasn't a man at all, but an obstacle to his imagined authority. He stepped closer, invading Wayne's space, the pungent mix of cheap cologne and youthful sweat filling the air between them. "We'll leave when we're finished here," Peterson said, his voice heavy with false authority. "Maybe you need a reminder about respect. Maybe you need to learn who's really in charge." The atmosphere thickened, humming with a tension only Wayne seemed entirely prepared to withstand. The boys were posturing like men, but beneath the polished shoes and tailored uniforms, they were still children, and children with strength they didn't understand could be dangerous. Wayne did not retreat. His silence was a shield, his composure a weapon they couldn't counter. The scene dragged like a slow-motion crash, one cruel word at a time echoing in the cold, unfeeling marble corridor. Then, without warning, something inside Wayne shifted. The harsh fluorescent light overhead gave way, in his mind, to a blistering sun hanging over thick jungle canopy. The arrogant voices faded, replaced by the heavy, rhythmic thwump, thwump, thwump of Huey helicopter blades slicing humid air. For a moment, the polished hallway floor dissolved into the mud of a landing zone. The sterile air reeked of gunpowder, jet fuel, and fear. On his faded work shirt, pinned just above the pocket, sat a tiny, tarnished silver star, its dull edges almost blended with the fabric. Earlier, one of the cadets had gestured at it mockingly. "What's that? Perfect attendance award?" But Wayne wasn't hearing him anymore. He was back in that jungle. He saw a younger hand, strong and steady, pressing the same star into his. Fatigues. He saw the broad grin of Sergeant Miller, barely 19 yet, carrying the weight of a man twice his years. "For luck, Jenkins," Miller had shouted over the roar of the rotor blades as they climbed aboard the helicopter for the assault on Hill 937. "So you'll remember how to get back." The memory flickered like a ghost, brief but sharp, and when it faded, it left something steeled within Wayne. The broom in his grip no longer felt like a tool for cleaning floors. It was the rifle stock of his M16. His stance adjusted subtly, the years peeling back. He wasn't merely a janitor. He was a soldier who still remembered exactly how to find his way back. From a side hallway, hidden just out of sight of the cadets, a young legislative aide named Sarah slowed to a stop. She was on her way to deliver a stack of documents, an errand that carried little weight, when the harsh, arrogant voices caught her attention. Peering around the corner, she saw them. 3 cadets looming over the old janitor. She recognized him instantly. It was Wayne, the man who greeted everyone with a quiet good morning, the man who hummed old tunes while pushing his broom, the man who seemed as much a part of the building as the marble columns themselves. Her first instinct was to keep walking. She was an intern, barely a footnote in the power hierarchy of Washington. Confronting cadets from a prestigious academy? That was far outside her role and potentially dangerous. They might have influential families. A single complaint, a whispered remark in the wrong ear, could derail her career before it had even begun. Her shoes felt glued to the floor. Then Peterson lashed out with his boot, scattering Wayne's neat pile of dust. It was such a small act, petty and mean, yet it broke through Sarah's hesitation, like glass shattering. It was wrong. Pure, unmistakable wrong. Her thoughts flashed to her grandfather, a veteran of Korea. He had been a quiet man too, carrying his stories deep within him, never demanding recognition. She saw him in Wayne, in his silence, in his dignity. The comparison stoked a hot, protective anger inside her. Sarah took a step back, heart pounding in her chest. She knew she couldn't confront them directly. That would be foolish. But neither could she simply turn her back. She knew exactly who she had to call. Sliding into a small alcove, she fumbled with her phone, her fingers trembling. She scrolled quickly past senators' numbers, chiefs of staff, senior aides, searching for the one extension that mattered. It was a long shot. The man she was about to call was one of the busiest, most powerful figures in the entire military structure, with an office on the top floor. He almost certainly wouldn't answer. But still, she had to try. Finally, she found the contact, The number belonged to the executive assistant of Colonel Marcus Thorne. She inhaled sharply, braced herself, and pressed call. The phone rang once, twice. "Colonel Thorne's office," came a crisp, professional voice. Sarah's own voice wavered, hushed with nerves. "My name is Sarah. I'm an aide in Senator Bradley's office. This is an emergency." There was a pause. On the other end, the tone shifted to skepticism. "The colonel is in a meeting. Can I take a message?" "No," Sarah cut in, her voice suddenly firmer, fueled by urgency. "You don't understand. Some cadets are harassing one of the janitors down in the main hall. His name is Wayne Jenkins." At that name, everything changed. The pause on the other end wasn't dismissive this time. It was sharp, attentive. "What was the name again?" "Wayne Jenkins," Sarah repeated, her voice steady now. "They're treating him terribly." "Please, I know the colonel would want to know." The line went silent, but she could faintly make out muffled, urgent voices in the background. When the assistant returned, the skepticism was gone. Every syllable was clipped, efficient, focused. "The colonel is on his way." Colonel Marcus Thorne sat behind a massive mahogany desk, the seal of the United States Army carved into the wood. His eyes were fixed on a satellite image of a volatile border region, his brow furrowed in concentration as he traced potential troop movements across the map. When his aide's voice buzzed through the intercom, he waved her off without even looking up. "Not now, Lieutenant." But the aide's voice cut in again, this time laced with a rare urgency. "Sir, it's about a man, a Mr. Wayne Jenkins." The name seemed to hang in the air. Colonel Thorne froze. His head snapped up, the map forgotten. A moment ago, his eyes had been dissecting terrain thousands of miles away. Now they burned with sudden, focused intensity. "What about him?" His voice was low, dangerous. "There's a situation in the main lobby, sir," the aide continued quickly. "A call came in from Senator Bradley's office. Some West Point cadets are harassing him." Thorne was out of his chair before the words had fully left her mouth. The transformation was startling. Gone was the quiet strategist, replaced instantly by the field commander. His movements were sharp, efficient, coiled with energy. He snatched his uniform jacket from the back of the chair and slid it on with practiced precision. "Get me General Casey's office." "Immediately," he commanded as he strode toward the door. "Tell him I have a code eagle. Dispatch a security detail to the main lobby. Quietly, no alarms. Just move." The aide faltered, stumbling after him. A code eagle, sir." The designation hadn't been used in over 10 years. It was reserved for the most sacred emergencies, incidents involving the nation's most revered and decorated living heroes. Thorne's jaw tightened. His pace didn't falter. "You heard me, Lieutenant." "Move." Scrambling to keep up, the aide fumbled for her phone. Her mind raced. She had heard whispers of Wayne Jenkins in Pentagon hallways. Half-legendary stories of a soldier from a war most her generation only knew from textbooks. She had always thought the tales were exaggerations. But in this moment, watching Colonel Thorne himself move with the intensity of a predator, every rumor suddenly felt very, very real. All of it, for a janitor in the lobby. Downstairs, Peterson felt smug, convinced he was winning. To him, the old man's silence was surrender. He believed he had seized control of the situation. "You know," Peterson drawled, voice dripping with fake authority, "insubordination is a serious offense, even for a civilian worker in a federal building. We could have you fired, or better yet," he leaned in closer, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper, "we could recommend you for a psych evaluation." An old man acting confused, belligerent. Who do you think they'll believe? The other two cadets shifted uneasily. This was going further than they had intended. It had started as a joke, a cruel way to pass time. But Peterson was dragging it into darker territory. Threats that could cost a man his dignity, even his livelihood. It was more than mockery now. It was destruction. Wayne finally broke his gaze from Peterson. Slowly, he let his eyes sweep the length of the corridor. He wasn't searching for help. He was reading the terrain, the way a soldier assesses a battlefield. Exits, obstacles, lines of sight. He had faced far worse than 3 boys in dress uniforms. He had stared death in the eye in jungles long forgotten. He would not break here. And then, without sirens, without shouts, something shifted in the air. It began with a sound, the sharp, authoritative rhythm of hard-soled dress shoes striking marble. The cadence was not rushed, yet it carried an unstoppable force. The sound sliced through the cadets' laughter, through the low hum of the building. One by one, heads turned. Staffers who had hurried past moments earlier now slowed, curiosity pulling them back. Conversations hushed. The three cadets fell silent, turning toward the sound that echoed with growing weight. Down the center of the hall marched a full colonel. His uniform was immaculate, his chest decorated with a constellation of ribbons and medals. He was flanked by two security officers, though they seemed almost unnecessary. The colonel himself radiated command. His very posture demanded obedience. His eyes, cold as ice, locked onto the scene ahead with an intensity that made the air feel thin. The cadets, who had been puffing out their chests only seconds earlier, instinctively snapped straighter. Their earlier bravado evaporated like mist in sunlight. The balance of power in the hallway flipped, sudden, complete, irreversible. Colonel Thorne came to a halt just feet away. He didn't glance at the cadets. His gaze was fixed entirely on Wayne Jenkins. His boots clicked once, sharply, against the marble as he stopped. The hallway seemed to hold its breath. From her hiding spot in the alcove, Sarah covered her mouth, eyes wide. Colonel Thorne stood ramrod straight, a living embodiment of the discipline the cadets had been so desperate to mimic. Then, in a voice that wasn't a shout, but carried the weight of a cannon blast, honed by decades of command, he barked a single word. Airborne! The word thundered off the marble walls. The cadets blinked in confusion. It was a relic to them, a term from history books, a phrase from another era, another army. But to Wayne Jenkins, it meant everything. The effect was instant, breathtaking. The weary old man disappeared. In his place stood a soldier. His back snapped straight, his shoulders squared, his chin lifted. His eyes blazed with a fire banked for decades. The broom fell from his hand, clattering forgotten onto the marble floor. And in a voice rough from age yet unshakably firm, he thundered the reply. All the way! Colonel Thorne's hand shot up in a salute, razor sharp, precise enough to cut glass. He held it, eyes locked on Wayne, as an unspoken testament of respect passed silently between the two men. The cadets stood frozen, bewildered. They had stumbled into a ritual they could not begin to understand, a sacred call and response of a brotherhood they had not yet earned. At last, Colonel Thorne lowered his salute, his gaze icy and unrelenting as it shifted to the cadets. His voice dropped to a quiet, dangerous register. Do you have any idea who you're speaking to? The boys said nothing, their faces drained of color, their mouths dry. Thorne's voice rose, each word ringing with authority, echoing across the marble. You are standing in the presence of Sergeant Major Wayne Jenkins. The title itself carried weight, but Thorne was far from finished. His voice took on the cadence of a prosecutor listing charges against an unseen enemy. This man is a recipient of the Distinguished Service Cross. He has 3 silver stars for gallantry in action, 4 bronze stars for valor, 5 purple hearts. Each decoration struck like a hammer. With every medal announced, the crowd of staffers, now thick along the hallway, gasped collectively, the sound swelling with disbelief and awe. Thorne's fury sharpened as he continued. This man led the forlorn hope charge at the Battle of Hamburger Hill after every officer in his command staff was killed. He held the line, alone, for 72 hours against an entire enemy battalion. He refused a battlefield commission 4 times because he believed his place was with his men. The colonel's voice shook now, not with weakness, but with contained fire. He is not a janitor. He is a living legend. And you worthless, arrogant children had the audacity to insult him. In the halls of the United States Senate, the silence that followed was crushing. You could almost hear Peterson's jaw hit the polished marble floor. Colonel Thorne stepped forward deliberately. The cadets, who only moments ago had been swaggering bullies, seemed to shrink beneath the weight of his stare. Your names, he demanded. Their voices came out in stammers, barely audible. Tomorrow morning, 0600 hours, You will report to my office in full dress uniform, Thorne commanded, every syllable clipped and merciless. You will spend the next 6 months studying every after-action report from Sergeant Major Jenkins's unit. You will produce a 100-page paper on the meaning of honor, courage, and respect. And you will be lucky, very lucky, if at the end of that I don't have you drummed out of the service entirely. You are a disgrace to the uniform you wear. He turned his back on them, a gesture of dismissal so final it cut deeper than any insult. Then when he faced Wayne again, his expression transformed completely. The ice melted, replaced by warmth and reverence. Sergeant Major, Thorne said, his voice soft now, carrying deep respect. It is an honor, sir. Wayne, who had remained rigid at attention, finally allowed himself to relax. A faint, weary smile touched his lips. His gaze shifted to the 3 terrified cadets. For the first time, a flicker of pity softened his eyes. They're just boys, Colonel, Wayne said gently. Full of fire, they just need to be pointed in the right direction. He bent slowly, carefully, and picked up his broom. Straightening again, he spoke just loud enough for the cadets and the onlookers to hear. A man's worth isn't in the medals he wears or the rank on his collar. It's in the job he does, and doing it right, no matter what it is. He looked down at the broom in his hands, his voice steady. This is my job now, and I'll see it done right. The words were simple, unembellished, yet they landed heavier than the colonel's fury. They were a rebuke without bitterness, a lesson in humility from a man who had seen war at its worst and still chose grace. As Wayne's words settled over the hallway, another image flickered in his memory. One no one else could see. That same small silver star, bright and unblemished, pressed into his hand. But it wasn't Sergeant Miller this time. It was an elderly Vietnamese villager. Wayne's unit had defended their village from a Viet Cong assault. In gratitude, the villagers had presented him with the little pin. It wasn't military issue, wasn't an award authorized by any government. Most likely it was a trinket purchased at a local market. Yet the elder had given it with solemnity, saying through a translator, for the soldier with quiet eyes and a strong heart. To Wayne, that pin had never symbolized valor in battle. It was a reminder of who he had fought for, of the innocent lives caught in the crossfire, of his duty to protect those who could not defend themselves. And in a quiet way, broom in hand, he was still living that duty every single day. The fallout from the confrontation was swift and decisive. The 3 cadets endured the harshest 6 months of their lives under Colonel Thorne's unforgiving oversight. They weren't expelled, but the arrogance was stripped from them, sandblasted away and replaced with a humbling, lasting understanding of the legacy they had sworn to uphold. The incident triggered an official review at West Point. From it came a new mandatory course for all first-year cadets. Legacy of Valor, a history program centered on the stories of enlisted heroes who had carried the weight of battle. The very first chapter of the course bore the name Sergeant Major Wayne Jenkins. As for Wayne himself, he carried on exactly as before. The administration sent him a formal written apology, stamped and signed, weighty with official seals. He accepted it with a nod, and then promptly used the letter to mop up a spilled cup of coffee. The floors still needed cleaning. About a year later, a young officer, newly commissioned, walked through the halls of the Senate building. His uniform was neat, his posture upright. He stopped when he saw the old janitor sweeping the floor. It was Peterson. He said nothing. He simply straightened, raised his hand, and delivered a slow, deliberate salute, perfect in form, heavy with meaning. Wayne paused his sweeping. For a long moment he studied the young man's face. Then with the faintest of nods he acknowledged him. The lesson had taken root. The fire had been aimed in the right direction. If you were moved by this story of quiet heroism, please like and share this video. Subscribe to BR Veteran Stories for more tales that honor the heroes who walk among us.